Hey, this is Jeff Currier passing through Bozeman this week, so I swung by to see my yellow dog buddies. And we're going to start this morning talking about the differences, the pros and cons basically between fishing in the Bahamas, Belize, or Mexico. Is one of those better than the other to catch a bonefish or a permit or a tarpon? We'll talk about some of the things that drive me to go to these places, the cultural differences, and which, by the way, for me, I love a fishing trip, and 75% of every trip I go on is to catch fish, but I also take in the culture, and I advise everybody to enjoy the places they go to more deeply than just the fishing. And I'll also talk about the gear needed. It does vary from place to place, even if you're going for the same species. When do you go? Is there a best time? Can you go anytime? All these are important things that are very common questions that people have. Let's get started. So where's the best place to catch a bonefish? If you're new to bonefishing, if you're new to saltwater, for me, I would probably go to either Belize or Mexico. Personally, my first recommendation is Belize because I've spent a ton of time in Belize myself, and I'm familiar with a lot of the guides, and they're very good with people getting started. And there are a ton of bonefish in Belize. That being said, if your opportunity comes to go to Mexico over Belize, that's a great place to catch bonefish as well. They're not as big here, but it's chock full of fish that are, in that 17 to 22 inch range, which is a beautiful fish. I know you're thinking, well, that's a big trout. Well, and trout pull pretty hard. Wait till you hook your first bonefish. If you've got experience in bonefishing, you've been to Belize and been to Mexico, and you're thinking about maybe you want to catch a little larger bonefish, then you got to focus on the Bahamas. I've definitely caught my biggest bonefish in this hemisphere in the Bahamas, and they're usually significantly larger. I mean, they still got plenty of small ones, but it's pretty common to cast to a 4 to 6 pound bonefish there, and I've got a few fish in that 7 to 8 pound range. It takes a little more skill. We'll talk about that later, but it's a great place to catch a trophy bonefish. Oh, we're going to talk permit now. A menace to just about everybody that fly fishes in salt water. Well, first thing I'm going to tell you, there are permit in all 3 locations, the Bahamas, Belize, and Mexico. And I've been fortunate, I've caught permit in all 3 places. But I would say if you really have your heart set on catching a permit, it's going to be, again, like the smaller bonefish, it's going to be either Belize or Mexico. There are parts of Belize that are better than others. I've actually caught some really nice permit out of a couple of my favorite places, Turtle Flats and Belize River Lodge. But if I'm really seeking permit in Belize, I go down south, Placentia or further south. The flats are loaded with permit down there. I will say there's going to be less bonefish, so if you're doing a combo trip, maybe that's not the place. But if you're after specifically permit, southern Belize is excellent. Mexico also needs to be mentioned here. Ascension Bay is an incredible place. I'd say probably more people in the world have got their first permit there than any other. I've had days where I've cast to 20, 30 permit in a day and caught. It's the only place I've caught multiple permit in one day. So that's superb too. And I'll also add that some people are like, well, what about big ones? I see a lot of pictures of people holding small permit from Mexico. Well, there are a lot of small ones, and that's why there's also a lot of big ones. I mean, small permit turned into big permit. A lot of big permit are caught in Mexico. I've caught permit in the Bahamas, and actually, that's probably the place I've fished the least, but I've had a couple really good permit days, meaning that I got a lot of shots, and I landed a big one there. One of the biggest permit I've ever caught came down in the Bahamas. So that's a good place, but again, I would say if I had to catch a permit, and I hadn't done a lot of permit fishing, I would go to either Mexico or Belize. And again, I should add one more thing about Belize. English-speaking guides, which not to say in Mexico you're not going to have an English-speaking guide, but it is something that is guaranteed. So that's nice when you're learning and trying to catch your first permit. Where should I go to catch a tarpon? Should I go to the Bahamas? Should I go to Belize or go to Mexico? Well, again, just like the bonefish and the permit, all 3 places offer fishing for these guys. I'm going to kind of kick out the Bahamas though, even though I've been in the Bahamas in the summertime, which if you are there in July or August or so, you're going to see tarpon. But you just can't beat going to Mexico or Belize. For me, Mexico is a great place for numbers of tarpon and what we call baby tarpon, which would be anywhere from like a 10 to 30 pounder. They're plentiful when you go into, not so much in the flats, so they're out in the flats, but when you go in some of the backcountry near Ascension Bay. But I've never seen a big one there. Maybe it's just me, and big meaning, 60 to 100 pounds. Belize, on the other hand, that's where I've done most of my tarpon fishing in my life. It is phenomenal. You can expect to catch baby tarpon year-round there. If you hit prime times, which would be that, I'd say late April, May, and June, and then again in November, that's when in Belize you actually have a chance to catch a really big tarpon. Believe it or not, it was about 10 years ago at Belize Lodge in November, my wife landed a fish that if you go by the measurements on that fish, it would have been about 170 pounds. I've seen a lot of big tarpon, but I wouldn't call it that big, but every bit 135, 140 pound fish. So that's a pretty magical fish. So I like Belize. So does equipment vary when you go from place to place, or is it the same? Because, I'm going bone fishing in Belize, I'm going bone fishing in the Bahamas, Mexico, should I just bring the same stuff? You can, but I do see some variations here. So I talked about bonefish a while ago and how you get smaller ones down in Mexico and Belize. Well, wouldn't you bring a smaller rod so you wouldn't wear your arm out? I would. When I go bonefishing in Belize or Mexico, I usually set aside my 7-weight as my bonefish rod. Now for some that may be a little light, I've got a lot of experience fighting big fish, so maybe we'd go an 8-weight, but I would say for Belize and Mexico a 7 or 8-weight for bonefish. The Bahamas, like I mentioned, those are big fish. I would do an 8 or a 9-weight. In fact, typically when I have any chance of seeing permit at the same time as when I'm bone fishing, which is always, and the bonefish are big, I go with my 9-weight rod and I'll keep a crab on there too, by the way. A lot of people think you have to have a shrimp pattern for bonefish, but bonefish will crush a crab. So rods would vary if I'm going bone fishing. Lighter rods for Mexico and Belize, a little bit heavier rod like a 9-weight for the Bahamas. What about tarpon? What about permit? Well, permit's going to be the same everywhere you go because, you could always run into that 20-pound permit, maybe a 25, even a 30. That's a rarity. You hear about it all the time, but trust me, that's a rare fish. For me, that's a 9-weight. Some people like a 10, but I'm a 9-weight straight guy, and I've had real good success landing some big permit. So no matter the location, Bahamas, Mexico, or Belize, a 9-weight rod. As far as tarpon go, now we've got a difference again. So if I was tarpon fishing in the Bahamas, which you could bump into all size fish, I'd probably have my 10 or 11 weight ready. If I was in the summer, I might even have a 12 because I've seen some pretty big tarpon there in the summertime. But when I'm going to Central America, Mexico, I'm probably going to use a 9 or a 10 weight for those baby tarpon. And again, I haven't seen a lot of big tarpon there, I'm sure, and there are some, but you're casting, you don't need to pack an essential amount of gear. I would go with a 9 or 10. Belize, depending on the season. If you're there in the wintertime, expect baby tarpon, and again, you can fish the 9 or 10. But if you are there late April, May, June, further into the summer and into November, you better have a 12-weight because there are some really, really big tarpon cruising around Belize in those months. Big question people have is, how do I carry my gear when I go to the flats? Well, one thing to consider or look into beforehand is like how much walking you're going to do wading the flats versus being in a boat. I personally love wading, so I'm usually prepared for wading. For me, that would be to have, definitely a waterproof pack. I love the Sims and the Yeti packs. They're phenomenal for walking the flats because they keep my stuff dry. Even if I set my pack in the water for a minute, everything's cool. But I don't overpack it. I got my rain jacket in there. Usually one box of flies. I've seen people, especially when they go on their early trips, they have so many flies, it's unbelievable. It's like they're going trout fishing in the Henry's Fort. They get 9 different boxes and they try to bring them all with them. Don't ever do that. I take like a master box, if this was the inside of one box, and just bring maybe 6 tarpon flies, 6 good crabs for, bone fishing permit, and 6 good shrimp patterns. Because when these things get sprayed with salt water by a wave or something, or get caught in the rain, it does mean you need to rinse them all off. So big fly box in my room where I take flies from for the day, and then a small fly box where I take on the flats. Just figure that you're going to use it for multi-purposes. For me, it's going to be my carry-on for flying, it's going to be my boat bag when I'm in the boat, and it's going to be what I carry with me on the flats when I'm wade fishing. So I'll tell you, one of the things I like about traveling is getting immersed in different cultures. A lot of people are so focused on the fishing, they don't even think about the fact that, hey, when I go to Mexico, it's pretty cool because they got neat food, they speak Spanish, people are just different, and it's just a lot of fun. I like to kind of get a grip on that. I always tell people, 75% of my trips is the fishing. The other 25% is to go see and hang out in the culture. And Bahamas, Mexico, and Belize, all three are very different. For people and myself, when I go to the Bahamas, is you get off the plane and everybody speaks English. Their culture is a little bit like ours. I mean, they're way more laid back, put it that way, but it is very comfortable when you get there. When I get to Belize, I feel like I have arrived in a foreign country, which is interesting because you get off the plane and people do speak English. Although there are times when people are speaking to you in English, it's still really hard to understand. I definitely say what a few times there. That's okay. What's cool about Belize is this country was formed by people that have migrated from, parts of Africa and Europe and, lived other parts of the Caribbean and finally migrated into Belize. And so you get all kinds of, cultures there too. They're all friendly, all three places, but something about the Belizeans, they're going to want you to go dancing with them. It's really fun in Belize. But I also sometimes like to get off a plane and have to test my, language skills. So Mexico is a Spanish-speaking country. You're going to get off the plane and maybe you have to get in a taxi or a bus to get to the next point to go catch a flight, and you're not going to understand what they're saying. That's fun for me. Spanish is something that I think most people have a little bit, in their back pocket. Practice a little beforehand. The food, we all love a good Mexican restaurant. Well, now when you're there, you're where it comes from. So don't be afraid to go out there and get a real Mexican burrito. I mean, I love the food in Mexico. That's something that I put very high on my list to literally get off the plane and start eating and enjoy it the time I'm there. And the people are so nice. I mean, the cultures down there are fantastic. I advise people to take an extra couple of days and maybe go see some of the Mayan ruins, while you're down there and see some of the countryside and meet some of the local people. So people commonly ask, when should I go to the Bahamas or Belize or Mexico? Is there certain times I should go over others? Can I go any time of year? Well, I'll tell you right now, all three locations, you can go any time of the year. We're fortunate now that there are lodges that stay open year-round. So if you want to, if you're working down in Atlanta or in Florida and you're close enough to shoot over to the Bahamas for a couple days, you should, even if it's August or September, because they do have fishing. That being said, I do have favorite times for fishing all three places. So Central America is typically fishes best from about late March, and it can still be a little windy at that time, but late March, April, May, and June. But there are some fish differences. So we always have bonefish, permit, and tarpon around those three locations. And the bonefish and permit fishing really doesn't change year-round because they're not really a migratory fish. What will change is if you're there in the middle of summer, we have a lot more rain in the summertime than we do in, say, April or March, so it's a little harder to see fish. Always keep that in mind. But the tarpon, on the other hand, that is very different. So in the wintertime, you have resident tarpon that live in Mexico, Belize, probably in the Bahamas too, and they're typically the smallers. They're the baby tarpon that haven't gotten into the big migrations yet. So if you're looking for larger tarpon, then the further in the season you go. So for me, big tarpon in Belize, meaning 60 to 100 pounds. Once in a while you get a great one. May and June, July is going to be better for those bigger fish. And then I have experienced some really big tarpon in October and November in Belize as well. So yeah, it makes a difference when you go based on the species you want to target. So I've concentrated a lot on bonefish, permit, and tarpon this morning, and that's because that's the three fish most people look for. Let me just tell you, from a guy that chases species all over the world, I just love the different species of fish that are out there. If it swims by you, for goodness sake, cast to it. I didn't even mention snook, and that is one of the great game fish that you find all over the Caribbean as well, specifically in Mexico and Belize, because by the mainland where snook like to live, they love being in the mangroves and in the river mouths and stuff. But if I see a snapper on the flats, or if I see a place where a snapper might live, for goodness sakes, I'm going to drop a clouser in there and try to catch them. If I see jacks busting, which is one of my favorite fish, let's tell you that, I am going to throw a popper into the school of jacks. I might even have a rod that I bring separately, maybe a 10 weight with a popper, to fish for the jacks. So enjoy it all. Don't get too locked into one species so that you don't cast others, and the end of the trip is like, well, I caught 3 fish because I passed up so many great opportunities. If you're a real saltwater fly fisherman and you love travel, you're going to hit all 3 anyway. And the more times you can hit all 3, the better, because all 3 are fabulous and have a lot of great things to offer.